Thanks everyone for having me. This is something that I love talking about, and it's such a fantastic venue for it. But it's actually an amazing segue because Roblox is one of those growth hacking platforms, and I love seeing what's going on in there and contrasting it with whatever used to be the old playbook, which is what I'm going to talk about. So the 4 pillars of scaling a free-to-play game. Before I dive into that, who am I? Why am I here? So Teemu, nice to meet you. Co-founder, chief product officer at Metaplay. I've been around in the games for, wanna say, 20-ish years soon. Some of the games that I've worked on, maybe the EVE Online title is maybe the most exciting one. Some of them I can't talk about, NDAs and all that. But my background is a game designer, game producer, hands-on developer for a long time. I've got a lifetime award from IGDA Finland, so been around in the community as well for a time. But for today, the most interesting angles are going to come in from Metaplay. So we are a backend tech company. We work with very large games to make essentially live service games for hundreds of millions of players. That's the goal. That's what we've been working with for over 6 years now. And the story that I want to tell today, because context is everything, is that what if you and me in this room right now, we set up a new studio? What's our first goal? Well, if we're playing in the VC-funded market landscape, then it's all about time to market, right? Like it all comes down to that, because we've got a couple of problems to solve. First of all, if we are aiming for that biggest possible scale, we want to be top crossing. We need a lot of data because, first of all, as you know, there's just no discovery on this platform. So you make a game and nobody's going to know about it at all. We need to buy ads because ads are the only scalable way to game. Because again, we're not talking about 10,000 players or 100,000 players. We're talking about hundreds of millions of players. Performance ads, only way to play. And those are sold on an auction place. Yeah? So we need to pay more than the person next to us is paying. And that's kind of a problem because they already have games. They know how much they can pay for those ads. So we need to get to a very high amount of confidence before we lock in literally hundreds of millions of euros into showing ads and hoping for the best that they're going to be eventually more profitable than our neighbors. That's a bit of a problem. And the only way to get there is essentially to have a bunch of data to take the guesswork from this. So what's the playbook then for you and me right now? Well, it's probably that our number one goal in life is to find a hit game that is worth investing in, right? And how do we do that? Well, we have to prototype it, free-to-play prototype, whatever that is. And we'll have roughly 2 major goals. We'll get to that data, and to get there, we'll have to have the minimums of, let's put the core gameplay in order. We need to have something to play, obviously. We need to soft launch it, meaning we have to get data from real players that get it from the real app store as if they were getting a new game, and it's a representative scalable sample. And to know what's going on, we need to have analytics, right? That's roughly the minimum that we have to build. And we have to build that about as quickly and cheaply as humanly possible, right? And that then generally means that most of the game we'll build it in offline mode so that we'll just like iterate on our laptops as fast as possible. We'll be focusing as much as possible on what makes us cool and different. And we'll try to use as familiar tools as possible so we get to leverage all of our past learnings. And this roughly has been how the Supercell playbook of how free-to-play games have been made for a good amount of time now. The problem is that it kind of doesn't work, right? So most games, now that we have this amazing team of ours and we're executing on lightning speed because we're finally getting rid of all the meetings and all the guesswork is being taken out and we're focusing well and we're doing the thing and we feel amazing and productive up to the global launch. But if you just look at what happens with games after global launch, even in the biggest of studios, is that all of that productivity and momentum just absolutely crashes down on the floor and burns through the basement and so on. Massive companies essentially do no progress in their games nowadays. And I find that fascinating. Why is that? Because it's literally preventing us not necessarily from shipping games, we're pretty good at that, but it prevents us from scaling them to be in the top grossing charts and the next phenomenon. And that's what I've been thinking about. That's what I want to talk about today. We basically call it the 4 pillars of scaling. So there's going to be 4 things that happen as your game starts scaling up. Number 1, we're going to be getting a huge amount of players into the game. So it's kind of obvious, but like anything that can go wrong will go wrong when you have 100 million players connecting on a single day to your game. And those are very difficult to predict for. So, okay, we're getting those players in. They're starting asking questions from us. They're forming communities. All of that is just like happening, massive ball of fire like going off, which is fantastic. That's what we wanted. And at the same time, our game is not done yet, obviously, because we focused, we did the MVP, and we launched early. And that just means that we are not at feature parity yet. We don't have 10 years of content in the game. So now we start filling out the blanks, if you will. So your game's complexity is going up on a systemic level. Of course, we want better monetization, better retention, all of that. But okay, lots of players, and a game is just like shooting up in feature sets and so on. That sounds like a lot of work to me. And we're like 10 people in the room. So let's start hiring. So our team sizes are suddenly ballooning up. And that adds all the complexity of our processes don't work anymore. Like nobody gets anything done suddenly. And we generally see companies go from some 10-something people, 20 people mayhaps in launch into close to 200 nowadays for like scaling a game. And even that's not a large team yet. So all of that complexity needs solving, all right, that 3rd pillar. And while all of that is happening, then we are now a revenue generating business. So we have to deal with obviously all the processes of finance in general, of like funneling those monies in, tracking them, budgeting, spending potentially hundreds and hundreds of millions month to month on ads and coming back and doing all the forecasting, as well as like business continuity and legal. And you're a real business now. We have to care about this stuff. If any one of these 4 pillars fails, then there's unfortunately a pretty good chance that our game will not become the next top grossing thing. So let's talk about solving all of them. How hard can it possibly be? Starting with number 1, number of players. As I said, players come in and anything that could possibly burn immediately burns, probably on day 1. And it roughly speaking looks like this. So players try to play your game and they literally won't. Like that's every single launch ever, roughly. Not amazing. Why is that? Well, without getting too technical, here's the leading reason. That when we are doing what was the playbook, which is focusing only on the problems that are at hand, that is like the winning condition of we need to get funding and get shipping and so on. We could be building something like this, which is technically speaking a very, very, very small backend system where you have players coming into the game. They connect to the game logic servers, which then connect to in-app purchase validation, notifications, and so on. There's a database because we need to save our players somewhere. We need the analytics because that was part of the MVP. And then that's how our team also connects to the game. Brilliant. There's 5 different ways I could wire this up by afternoon today, probably for free. It's a solved problem. Except when you have 100 million players coming in. And then it literally does not work anymore. Like these systems, they have tipping points. So, for example, we've seen situations where the physical machines run out of Linux sockets on a networking level and they just can't accommodate more connections, and like very, very interesting stuff starts to happen when there's too many players. And the most typical problem here, FYI, is that the database itself doesn't scale. And as it turns out, it is the most difficult thing in technology to fix once you already have that problem. So databases are hard. I'll get back to that later. But these are sort of the boring things that will happen. The way you generally go about it, this is like the one-stop shop. Fix it like this. And by the way, you can take screenshots of the slides if you want to, ask them later, or you can just listen. There's more info here than what I'm going to say. But essentially, it's about robustness and observability, where robustness means that, hey, even when things go bad, will it handle it? And observability means, do we even know what's going on? and then can be then kind of manually intercept. And it's kind of simple. Let's make bots, and let's start those bots hammering down our game, and then kind of see what happens. And then since we have observability tools, then we'll figure out, oh, it burns, and then we'll get to fix it and so on. And then maybe an interesting anecdote is that instead of just building this, we ended up also building sort of these human approachable systems that kind of show you the top errors in a nice round bordered HTML element with nice fonts so that you might actually read it. Because if you open the underlying tools of this stuff, it mostly looks like avant-garde glitch art, which is super, super useful if you're a networking engineer. But for anybody else, I'm kind of hard time seeing what's going on. So you kind of need to understand that there's multiple people in your team, and they kind of need their own levels of like what kind of information they can interact with. But beyond just the technical problems, because sure, I find that interesting. That's what we do. Beyond the technical problems, it's also the customer support, right? If you again have those 100 million players, I'm going to be talking a lot about them. But if those players are maybe previously sending you 1 or 2 messages per day, yeah, absolutely, you can answer those emails. But if you're getting 10,000 messages per day, I don't have enough time to write that many emails anymore. I need tools. So obviously, ticketing systems and so on are kind of best practice nowadays. But then also the tools that your customer support people will be using in 25 different languages to actually resolve those tickets. There's three tools that you need in particular, without going through all of them. The first one would be just literally seeing what's happening with the players, having access to their analytics events and kind of seeing a timeline of, hey, this player said that they lost all of their gems. They spent 1,000 in the game, now they lost everything and they're super mad at you. But then if you have visibility into what the player has been doing, you can kind of tell that, oh, you actually spent them also. You bought them and you spent them on these things, and I think you're trying to social engineer for some more, and no, but I'm thankful for your purchase. And the number one thing that causes the most pain, that's like the most costly thing to fix, is reconnecting accounts to lost devices, or vice versa. Somebody loses their phone and loses their account, and they spend 10,000 in your game. They probably want access to their account. So even today, with the social logins of like, whether you're using like Facebook logins or Google Play or Apple's Game Center, people still lose their accounts. We need to have a good way of like recovering them super fast. A lot of AI tools are being used for this nowadays, as I understand it, because it's an honestly quite expensive problem to solve. And then like the one-stop shop is, let's add some way of communicating to our players, please. So a way to basically send an in-game message and attach some rewards and so on. That's how we can solve most of we can freestyle around the problems if we have these tools in place. There's more. Those are the 3 important ones. Okay. So players are coming in. Our servers are handling them. Our customer support isn't just like running around like a headless chicken. We have a system for this. It's good. It's good. Now, let's make that game. So my one-liner statement for this is that there just simply isn't such a thing as a simple top-crossing title. These are hobbies that last for tens of years nowadays. So they might start simple, and they usually are, like the core is approachable, but then you end up finding deeper layers in it. So let's talk about those deeper layers. The way I would simplify this, which makes it inaccurate, but I'm going to stick with it, is that in the pre-launch phase, remember, we are like just us in the room, quickly working on something. We probably really mostly care about being able to work offline super quickly and to have those analytics. Those are like must-haves. And then we sort of kind of probably care about managed deployments, which means that we're not physically handling servers and so on, but we like upload the game somewhere and the game runs. That's good. We want a bunch of pre-made features, whatever those are, Unity or Metaplay or something that we can just kind of quickly integrate, if you will. And then we want it for cheap, maybe free. That's what we care about pre-launch. But we're no longer in pre-launch, right? The moment the game becomes a hit and players start pouring in, then suddenly we have a lot more requirements for our game. For example, we want I was talking about tools just now, customer support and so on, but we want live ops tools. So we start to be running seasonal timed events, and that means over-the-air configuration of the game. We simply can't be pushing builds all the time. We didn't need that before, now we need it. Or we need localization, right? Like we don't need localization when we are pre-launching, but the moment we know that it starts scaling, then how do we do this? How do we now remotely start pushing that localization? Or do we have to rewrite the game to support like the 130% longer German words or whatever that? And it doesn't end there, because that's not even what we're talking about. When you are a hit game and then you go all the way to the right to be one of the biggest games, then it explodes again. And now we're talking about the security of your system, because suddenly your game is a prime target for hackers, right? Like GDPR violations and so on are a thing. We start to talk about self-hosting our systems, because suddenly the legal repercussions for us losing our player data it just ends the business instantly. So just for our business continuity reasons, we suddenly want to have that. We start to talk about how do we onboard 100 new developers into our company? Like, do we have documentation? Oops, turns out we don't. And all of that. So what I'm kind of saying here is that it's not you need everything at once, but it's a sort of incremental add-on over time. And if we know about it beforehand, we can plan for it beforehand. Then it becomes manageable. But if we get surprised by it, trouble, a lot of trouble. So if I threw a couple of just high level, here's what I would do. Here's what I would think about. First of all, I would think about cheat-proofing the game. And that basically means that if something is worth buying in your game, then it's worth stealing in that same game. And games with cheaters are very rarely fun to play, especially if it's a multiplayer game or competitive or something like that. And that's an easy fix. So basically we do what's called server-authoritative games. If you're interested, there's a QR code. Not going to go into the specifics. But it's a solved problem nowadays. And then once we have those players in, and hopefully it's a secure economy where they have purchases that are worth buying and all of that, then what's your social meta? What's your meta progression? So what's the long-term hobby, whether it's competitive or collaborative? We're probably talking about something like guilds, which is collaborative, social, let's come together and make something interesting happen over time. Or we're talking about seasonal leagues, bronze leagues, and like sort of multiplayer career that gives you interesting matchmaking as you're learning the game with other players and becoming a somebody instead of nobody in the social graph of the game. It depends on what you're building, but we generally we have one or more of these systems, and the top grossing games tend to have all of them in parallel, because again, 100 million players kind of encompasses all possible player profiles or psychologies. So you want to have multiple things to latch onto in the sense of the metagame. And then obviously there's technical nuances to all of this. Let's glance over that. If you're interested, talk to me. What's really hard about this, though, that very few people kind of realize, is that working and iterating and designing these sort of long-term meta systems, very, very slow and hard. So what I mean with that is that it's kind of hard to test something that you experience over 5 years. The iteration loop is about 5 years on that one. It's hard to accelerate those, which is why we tend to see people copy a lot in this area. And be very, very mindful of what's the new system that we're trying, because we can't fundamentally iterate on it much. And that's a really, really interesting problem to solve, in my opinion. Small things help, like making your matchmaking systems visible on a dashboard and so on. This particular picture tells a very sad story of a player base where you have a lot of matches available on the left side, the beginning area. That's where a lot of players are grouped up in skill level. Then there's this death valley in the mid to late game, and then there's a huge candle at the end where all the paying players are, essentially. Like the highest engaging players are all the way to the max level, and they can have fat matches, but nobody else can in the middle. A very typical problem. How do you solve it? I don't know, man. Sounds difficult, because that's up to you how your game's designed. Let's talk about it. But first step is observability. At least we know what's going on in the game. And in general, this whole concept of live ops Not going to dive into it too much, but it comes down to basically saying all foundation of live ops is about segmentation. So as long as we know that we have different types of players in the game, then we can have over-the-air updatable game logic that applies slightly differently to all of those players. So beginning players and end game players can literally have different events available at any given time, and as designers we can work through that. It does get quite complex when you get all the way into it, but the simpler examples of that would be, instead of obviously hard coding stuff into the game, let's put it in an editor that designers can use. For example, Google Sheets is kind of popular. And then we start serving that to different clients in different ways, and that's how we do A/B tests and different timed events and so on. Devil is in the details, but this is fundamentally how we have to make the game, because this is how we will be able to push new content to the game fast enough. Okay. Let me come back to the technicals. So if we keep in track, what does it take to build a system like this? I'll speed run you through it. It looks something like this. I've done this a couple of times on a napkin. So first of all, you have a bunch of players coming in, like a lot of them. And because there's way too much of them, we need load balancers. And those load balancers then help us split the load into the servers that handle game logic, which is, by the way, different from the servers that handle real-time multiplayer logic. And also we need CDNs, so content delivery systems, to actually deliver those configs and assets and so on over the air. And we do need to connect to those push notification and in-app purchase services and so on. And we do need persistence, which needs to be sharded, meaning there's multiple copies of the databases working in tandem so that you can scale them. And then all of this put together starts to sound like a game cluster. Okay? And the moment I say the word cluster, you obviously think management tools. So there's no way that you will just SSH into a box and start handling it. You need to define this as data, whether that's Kubernetes and Terraform or whatnot. And when I say that, then obviously you need to do it automatically. So that means continuous integration and continuous deployment tools that we actually use to manage the cluster. And then we get to talk about, okay, monitoring. I mentioned monitoring earlier. So we need to know what's happening on the hardware. That's called monitoring tools. Then we need to know what's happening on the game simulation itself. That's called logging. And then we need to know what's happening in the game that your players are playing on top of all of this. That's called game analytics. Did someone mention live ops? That's probably a thing we need to do. And I'll stop there. That's a super high level version of what most Finnish studios build internally. And the interesting thing here is, again, that it fundamentally looks very, very, very different. Quick and dirty thing in the beginning, which, by the way, is already burning because the database is overloaded, and now we are in a migration back. And our time as a studio is spent on managing the active fire that is our previous solution and figuring out what's the path to get to something, whether it's the one that I just showed or something else. And that's a really deeply unfair situation to be in. It's super hard. You can't just do it. You need very smart people thinking for a long time of how do we even, on a theoretical level, will pull this off. We don't want this problem, which is why we talk about the team size, right? We need help, now. And it's a fact. Bigger teams can solve more problems in parallel. So let's do the thing. The main problem is that the workflows that worked for 20 people absolutely do not work for 120 people. Not even a little bit. And we've seen this a lot of times, right? In Finnish studios and globally as well. Not to call Finns out on this one. And it just basically means that now we are figuring out our producer structures and figuring out leadership and company culture. And really we are starting to do small technical solutions like having multiple copies of the game running in parallel internally so that we can have subsections of the team maybe work on feature 1, 2, and 3 in parallel because we have multiple environments so that we can effectively multitask or parallelize our workflows. Wasn't needed before, is needed now. Not particularly hard, honestly, but it's just work. We need to do the work. And the most difficult thing about this, as it turns out, is simply release management. So if you have a team that's working on 5 features in parallel, then in which order do you merge them into the main trunk of your development and balance it and QA it and put it out when like all of those teams are late and like running around you know what game development is like. That problem is like the most difficult problem. Turns out the technical side is solvable. That one isn't. Also, documentation would be pretty good by now, so I hope you have it in order, or maybe you have a plan for how to do that. What I find helps is like if you do one thing, do your CIs first. So just having a huge amount of constant automatic testing cover the game. That's the only way to scale a code base nowadays. And especially in the age of AI, we have easier and easier ways of adding tests to our games so that we have more confidence faster. Enough on that. Then there's the boring part, money. So basically, if we are making, hypothetically, $1 billion a year with this topic, that's the lower end of top grossing titles, then anything that could disrupt that is obviously massively bad. So even one single day of downtime or like a, I don't know, missed payment that closes an account, absolutely catastrophic. So we need to avoid all of that. A few things that we are thinking about at this point. We need to make more money, of course. 1 billion, not enough. We need 2, maybe 5. And of course, it's simple. To have more bottom line, it means that we have better return on ad spending, which means we're going to show more ads, which means we're going to scale faster. So it's a flywheel. We need to accelerate the flywheel. And interestingly, there's no one thing that, at least that I've seen, that companies do at this point, but they are all of them talking about data-driven live ops, because that is a very tangible way of basically making a game more fun, more profitable. Turns out that of the whole games industry, which is still growing and the biggest it's ever been, 75% of all games are live service games, which means that we have huge amount of engagement on the platform. And specifically the amount of time spent in games it's 100x to other medias. So people are spending a lot more time in games than Netflix and so on. But when it comes to ads, only a couple of % of all ads globally go to games. So for example, that's a reason why we think about it, that even small ways of tastefully bringing ads into games, suddenly it's literally $1 trillion market. Who's going to do it first? Maybe one of you guys. And then we're thinking about, in general, what I'm saying is different ways of making money from the game. So obviously, in-app purchases were one, that's kind of normal. But hey, where's the subscriptions? Where's the different motivations behind the in-app purchase? Where are the ads? And so on. And then where are the balances of the economy so that we have something that's fun and interesting to the players who are literally spending 100,000 euros into the game? How is that the most fun version of the game compared to only spending 1,000 in the game or not spending anything? So it's balancing the game to be amazingly excellent for those people. Kind of a big deal. And there's all this other stuff, even Web3s and so on. Maybe I'll just kind of smoothly roll over them. If you're interested, there's a bunch of stuff that I'm seeing at the moment that is kind of interesting that people are trying. But again, if there's one thing I could convey is that you can't do any of this unless you had segmentations from before. So by implementing segmenting, it kind of unlocks all of this creative space for thinking about how the game could look and feel for different players at different parts of the game. A really good way of approaching it. So do that. It's good. And then the only slide that I don't have a photo on because it's so boring is business continuity, so legal and stuff. It turns out there's a couple of things that you probably should do, all the biggest companies do, is like just at this point guaranteeing that you have access to the underlying source code of all the systems that you're using, technology and so on, because then if something goes wrong, you can fix it. Like it's possible to pour money into the problem and fix it, as opposed to having black boxes. Kind of important. Wasn't before, it is now. Self-hosting all the game data, so basically meaning that you own your database, because your database is the game. Everything else is simulation, but game state is the database. So if that goes bad, no recovery ever at all. So hence, let's take that, then we cover most of the risks. It's good. And we talk about incident responses and who wakes up in the middle of the night when something goes bad. Hopefully it's not always the same founder. Like hopefully there's at least the other guy that can do it every now and then. Who handles support for different time zones? It's not that hard, but we want to put that in. One life hack, which small companies do not use ever, but big companies love to use, is getting access to premium support. So literally, let's spend some money and make sure that if you're working with key partners, whether they're ad networks like AppLovin or something, or technology providers like Unity or us, then just make sure that there's somebody you can call, like an actual person that will care, and then you can probably sort through most problems. And turns out you can do that with money. And if we are a revenue-generating business, then it's good that we want to do it. Again, not in the beginning, towards the end, absolutely. And automated testing, still absolutely a life hack. So all of that, I don't know about you, but for me, it sounds like a lot. It's a lot. I'm tired. What do we do? What do we actually do? Here's my recommendation. So these 4 things: number of players, the size of the game, the size of the team solving your problems, and then making sure that your revenue stays good. Not all of this obviously needs to be there day one, but it's something that is a sort of circle that they feed into each other. That as we get more revenue, then we can afford more players, and as we get more players, then our game systems need to grow, and team size, and loop and loop and loop. So first of all, don't panic, never panic. Let's just assume that we're going to be iterating on this for a long time and set that as the initial plan. And specifically, if we happen to be in the context of a new game, then I can be a bit more concrete. Here's what I would do for a new game. That if we think about that range from pre-launch towards the top crossing, there's only a couple of things we really need to even consider pre-launch. I would personally talk about the programming models and so on day one, because that kind of solves a lot of problems for us instantly when we know where we're getting into. I would put in the game configuration, so the over-the-air updates very quickly, not day one, but maybe on the second day. 3rd day latest. And then that just means that I'm already unlocking live ops while we're developing it, and we can kind of learn together how this game is going to stay topical, seasonal, how does it feel for us to work with these tools. We want to be in that loop pre-launch. Then just before we launch, let's talk about DevOps and how do we handle customer support and so on. But that's it, right? And then as we start to go through the hit game and towards the top crossing section, there's a lot that we can then add one by one and people that we can call. But as long as we have that road ahead of us, as long as we know where we're heading into, we can ask the good questions, and we will be coming up with a plan. Because my favorite saying from Matthias, hope is not a plan, okay? Literally doing due diligence on this stuff is by math 100% cheaper than figuring out in 2 years. Because now we can just change our ways, but in 2 years we'll have to spend a lot of time just rebuilding the systems. It's going to be very expensive. This is time well spent. You could argue that it's a positive problem if you have the time to figure it out later. But nobody ever figures it out later. That's not a thing. It's blood, sweat, and tears. And the other way, maybe more positive way of saying that is that making something future-proof doesn't mean that you have to be slow. You simply need to know where you're heading into. So, I would propose thus that now us making a game, maybe it isn't about time to market. Maybe it is more about time to scale. If our goal is to make something large, what is the fastest way to that large bit? Well, obviously getting information in the middle. And if we take that view, we'll end up making a lot better choices. Obviously, if you're interested, something that we do, we don't solve all of it, we solve some of it. Talk to me about it. You can find me in LinkedIn. But also, I believe we do have some time for questions. So, thank you.
Thank you, Teemu. We have luxurious time for questions, and we can unravel a lot of this. It's a lot. Yeah. So I felt like
it's a lot.
I'm going to get my coat and retire. Things have become more complex, and I'm pretty sure that you sort of scared everybody to come and ask help from you. with
Good.
this presentation.
Good.
So I mean, I hope that the reality is less scary, but I don't think it is.
It's less scary. Why I think that sounds scary is that for some reason it's unfamiliar, right? Like we make games and we spend here 4 years thinking about how to build it, and still somehow this is additional information. It goes push. But if you spend any amount of time with this, it's draw it on a napkin in a pub, and you're like, yep, that's how it goes. And,
So is it like sort of like I wanted to say that free-to-play mobile is super tough competition, but and it's like really hard to get in there. But have we even like it's been a while that games have been live services, right? It's been a long while. But we're still sort of not super used to that. So as you said, that it's sort of like, it could be afterthought. Yeah. The success is a catastrophe easily there. Yes. So it's just like trying to make a good game and not thinking necessarily in a native way with the live service things.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right. I think a big part of that is that games are the biggest mass medium of our time with a huge margin to the rest, which just means that we've been making games for a long time. And most people have been making something other than live service games. And it's only, I think, recently that live service games have become, really with mobile, the only way to live in terms of that space. So then we started to have people competing in it. And with competition, they basically ran ahead and just like raised the bar so much. And that hasn't happened yet with like PC console as much. Only with like shooters maybe, Fortnites and all that. Roblox, sure. But there's a huge amount of surface area that we don't have the next live service games of most genres yet. So not all of that is needed in those genres yet. So there's time to learn.
Yeah.
So there's also that.
Does it make sense to try to compete with the ones that have been running for almost 2 decades now?
Nope, not at all. Not even a little bit.
With the help of Metaplay.
Well, we obviously work with the companies that do. Supercell still makes games, and they will go into competing in like red ocean genres, but then they sort of have a lot of ongoing, what would you call it? Like they have the gut feeling of how to do it because they're already doing it in other games. So then they can go and compete. But if I were to do live service games, I would pick a genre that doesn't have that treatment yet, or like somehow very clearly kind of zag a little bit. But then apply all the best practices, like let's use Metaplay or whatever that might be. Yeah,
great. So we have a chance for the audience, which is now getting further back, I see, of asking questions.
Whoa.
But I'm going to ask this one. So you've been doing free-to-play games before you started Metaplay.
Yep.
So that was sort of like a perspective of one or a couple of productions per time. But now you're working with how many productions at how many?
I want to say 30 or so in parallel. Yeah.
So that's like a acid for learning for things in free-to-play design.
Yeah.
So what are the lessons that you've learned if you would be becoming like a free-to-play game developer again, not the B2B part, but making your own game? What are the lessons that you learned from kind of seeing the overview of so many different productions? Like a lot of them, obviously, they're still here with the team and producers, those kind of things, but in design-wise.
Yeah. Okay. Good question. Me something difficult. But so
this is super easy.
Yeah. Personally, my takeaway is it's kind of boring, but it relates to what I was saying about the long-term meta and how difficult it is to iterate on that. So specifically that we have fantastic tools for working on the UI feedback of the game and the game feel part of it. So I have like zero concerns about will I be able to make a game that feels good? Yes, of course. But then will I be able to make a game that actually has fun pacing between having played it for 6 months and then specifically 7 months, like that period? Did I balance it correctly? Very hard to do. And my maybe part of the insight seeing to all these other productions is that nobody's figured it out. Like that no one has that magic formula, and specifically no one knows either. There's very few people on this planet that I've ever met that have confidence in the 6 to 7 month retention area of the game. So that just means, hey, no one's better at this than I am necessarily. So let's just figure it out. Paying a lot of special attention to, hey, that's going to be hard. So I would set up my game in a way that I can very easily go and kind of sample those experiences and like find a way to experience it, iterate on it, and then it's going to be good.
Yeah.
So that's a different approach to it, maybe. So yeah, I may be more thinking about the long term, the second to second.
So like how to set up the production and what are the things that you're like imagining as experiences for the players?
Yeah, like if it's an MMO, am I still fighting monsters for better swords? Okay. Is it the same or different? Do I have more skills, less skills? Do I still have stuff to unlock at that point? Or am I like forming guilds, or what is it? And like making sure that the user journey is kind of clear.
Yeah. Any questions from the audience? Any brave hearts to ask anything from this complex topic? It seems I'm alone here with this, but I'm gonna pour more in. So let's just sort of like, you're doing B2B, you're serving 30 plus customers. On your website, you talk about Unity, but you like, we saw the presentation, but what does Metaplay actually do?
Oh, you had to ask that. Yeah, so we have basically, we do a game server that runs the game, that owns the player state, runs in the cloud, that's the game. We do the SDKs that allows clients like Unity to connect to that game and makes the development easy and fun. We do the dashboards that I was showing screenshots of, so the things that you as a game designer or customer support person or what have you basically see what's going on in the game. And then we do all the servers that it actually runs on. So we're sort of like the in-house tech team of a bigger studio, essentially. But that's multiple things, and it all, just works Apple thing of like, here it is.
Sounds like super soothing, to be honest. But you also have to then work with regulations and those kind of things. How do you keep up to speed with all the different things happening in the EU and other countries?
I'm very happy about NeoGames and European Games Federation and so on. So to try to, indeed, we've tried to understand what is GDPR or what are the upcoming Digital Market Acts, or how do we deal with like external payment providers? Honestly, kind of boring stuff. But yeah, that's
very important.
Part of the job. Yeah, honestly, more of my time goes into working directly with game designers, talking about, well, what are you making?
Yeah.
That's, how do you make it? Going, oh, you don't want to do it like that, boy. Let's make it better and figure out.
You're the boring sound that was hired to do that. Okay, so things have become more complex for the past decade or so. So how are AI tools helping to beat the complexities? Or are we just, we're adding more complexities with this current situation?
That's a good question. Let's talk about that a lot nowadays with the customers as well. The first answer is that AI helps us speed run towards the complexity. So yeah, adding more is more, of course. But from a new team point of view, when you know where you're going towards, as in I haven't built all the guild systems yet or whatever it is that we're building, then we have a lot of existing code samples for the AI, maybe even design samples or samples of the marketing art. Yeah, it literally allows us to do the thing faster. That's fantastic. But more importantly even, it allows people to adopt more information faster. So like whatever I had in this presentation, there's going to be blog posts and whatever talking about this in depth. So let the AI help you digest the information and just like process it faster, get going faster. So I think it really is like that superpower of like, oh, I need to figure all this out. Fine, with AI help, we can without hiring new people. So smaller teams are able to be more competitive for sure today. But we don't know how far that can go, because I was just over this weekend, I was talking with one of our customers who tried for the first time ever last week to basically do end-to-end new features on top of Metaplay with AI, and was apparently successful, which was very surprising to me because that's the first time I've ever heard of somebody even trying, basically describing, I want an inventory system. Please go and look through the source code and like figure out how to implement this, so that from a developer point of view, you wouldn't have to first, step one, become an expert in game design of inventory systems and then figure out the technical nuances of inventory systems. But you can kind of stay more in the design space and then ask for, go be the expert. So it seems like that loop is starting to work. Super exciting.
We might have a hope that some of the boring stuff could be given to AI.
100% can. Yeah, 100%
They're not taking our most exciting parts.
Yeah.
Okay, a lot of the indie developers working small teams, talking about the scalability. What if they have a huge success? Like, let's say that they do work in mobile space.
Sure.
Whether it's a free-to-play or premium, but like, these are coming like behind the corner, sort of like attacking to you.
Yeah.
So what are the kind of least, if you're just a hobby that might have a chance to have a huge success, what are the least kind of, or the most critical things to think on the time that you're not thinking about your success?
Yeah. I mean, aside from everything,
all the things. Yes.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be mobile. This stuff is true on all the platforms. Like PC is now like ramping up super heavily on live service stuff. Live ops, so over-the-air updates and a way to push out new stuff into the game over the air, and then some kind of way to get feedback from the game of how are players doing, which leads into segmentation, which leads into better loop, like that.
Even in a smaller scale already.
I would do it for like even single player games, just because it's a more like you'll save time as a developer. There'll be a faster way for you to make the game to begin with, which is good. But then the moment it's live, it suddenly just gives you all the other possibilities. So yeah, like designing the game to be data driven from day one.
Yeah.
For any indie, that's 100% what I would do.
Yeah.
And then you'll be in a good position after that.
Are there services to buy if you're not into that side of the things?
Well, no,
okay.
Ask.
All right. I think that we are quite well with the questions, unless someone wants to ask and use this opportunity to get more insight to it. So thank you, Teemu, so much. This was so much more complex that a lot of us are thinking about, and it's even getting more complex. So we'll be using a lot of B2B businesses in that sense.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you so much. We're going to have a break.
Thank you.